Imagine standing in an abandoned, totally echoing New York City subway station.
Oh, that's already eerie.
Right. And it's April 2020. You are zipped up inside this suffocating, completely non-breathable hazmat suit.
Yeah.
You're sweating, the air you're breathing is filtered and stale, and you are currently on your hands and knees methodically scrubbing human skull fragments out of bathroom grout.
Wow. Okay.
And the truly terrifying part, like the part that really messes with your head, you realize that you actually feel significantly safer in that plastic suit, surrounded by literal gore, than you do walking around in your own skin.
It's a profoundly unsettling image, but it perfectly encapsulates the psychological paradox we're exploring today.
Totally.
The idea that, extreme visceral horror could somehow become a sanctuary from an even more terrifying everyday reality.
Welcome back to the deep dive. If you are tuning in right now, I know exactly who you are. You're someone who is insanely curious. You're someone who wants to bypass the overwhelming, often exhausting flood of surface-level information out there and just get straight to the core of a fascinating subject.
You want the substance.
Right. You want the deep analysis, you want to understand the why and the how behind the what, you want multiple perspectives, and you want those genuine aha moments, but you absolutely respect your own time and don't want to drown in trivia.
Exactly.
That is our mission today. We are looking at the novel Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker.
Such a powerful book.
It really is. Our goal, to unpack how this incredibly gripping, intensely supernatural horror story serves as a visceral, terrifying time capsule of New York City during those early days of the 2020 pandemic.
It's a remarkable piece of source material.
Yeah.
I mean, what the author does here is take intense psychological trauma, weave together with deeply rooted cultural folklore, and, well, layer it all over a foundation of incredibly sharp social commentary.
Right.
It's not just a horror story. It's
Yeah.
really a sociological autopsy of a very specific moment in time.
To give you a high-level view before we jump in, we are following a 24-year-old art history major named Cora Zeng.
Right.
It's the beginning of the pandemic. She's lost her job at the Met, and she's taken a job working as a crime scene cleaner.
As one does in a crisis.
Exactly. We watch Cora navigate the devastating, life-altering trauma of witnessing her sister Delilah's horrific murder. But that is genuinely just the beginning of the nightmare.
It gets so much worse.
It really does. She is simultaneously dealing with a series of gruesome serial killings targeting Asian women across the city. And if that wasn't enough on her plate, she's dealing with a literal physical haunting by hungry ghosts.
A lot to process.
Yeah. I have the perfect guide sitting across from me today to help untangle all of this. We're going to break down the folklore, the psychology of her trauma, and the societal fractures depicted in this book.
I am very much looking forward to diving into this with you.
Yeah.
The author uses the mechanics of horror not just for cheap scares, but as a magnifying glass to examine some very real, very raw societal wounds.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
And the imagery Baker uses to do that, it just grips you instantly. It refuses to let go.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there's this one moment where she describes a leaky subway station as a place that bleeds when it rains. It sets this tone of a city that is fundamentally wounded. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's start right at the beginning. The setting.
Right.
April 2020 in New York City. Think about how you navigated those early pandemic days.
Right, the isolation.
You probably remember wiping down groceries, the fear of touching a doorknob, the eerie, unnatural silence of the streets. Now imagine layering an intense pre-existing germophobia over that global anxiety.
The landscape the author paints here is striking, precisely because it subverts our expectations of New York.
Yeah.
It's not the bustling, vibrant city we usually see in media. It's an apocalyptic wasteland. The city is described almost like an enormous dead body.
That's a great way to put it.
It's empty, it's echoing. The author emphasizes the auditory isolation. I mean, the only sounds are the distant, lonely wails of sirens and the low, eerie hum of streetlights. Right. That hum was always there, of course, but previously it was drowned out by the noise of millions of people living their lives.
It's an incredible atmospheric choice because it isolates the characters completely. You can practically hear their footsteps echoing for blocks. The city is hollowed out.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating to me is how Cora reacts to this dead city. For most people, the onset of the pandemic was completely terrifying. It was a loss of normalcy.
Absolutely.
But for Cora, who already struggles with extreme germophobia, who already views the entire city as inherently dirty and coated in a layer of biological grime, the pandemic provides this incredibly strange, dark comfort.
You're touching on a crucial psychological detail regarding control.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, before the pandemic, Cora's obsessive behaviors, her constant hand-washing, her intense desire to avoid touching anything with her bare hands, the fact that she runs 3 air purifiers in her small apartment, all of that made her a social outcast.
Right, people thought she was weird.
People thought she was strange, overly anxious, neurotic. But suddenly, in April 2020, the world flips. The CDC is on television, telling everyone to wash their hands obsessively, to fear the air, to avoid surfaces at all costs.
Right, suddenly she's not the crazy one.
Exactly. Cora's extreme phobias are suddenly the mandated norm. She isn't an outcast anymore. She is, as the text explicitly puts it, a good American.
A good American.
Her trauma responses, her hypervigilance, are entirely validated by a global crisis. The author uses this to show how the definition of sanity is often just a measure of how well your personal anxieties align with society's current level of panic.
That is such a fascinating point.
For Cora, the lockdown is almost a relief. The boundaries she always wanted to put between herself and other people are now legally enforced.
It's a twisted kind of validation. She finally feels in sync with the world because the world has become as terrified as she is.
Yeah, exactly.
And we see this dynamic play out so clearly in the inciting incident of the novel. It's such a mundane mission, which makes the horror that follows so much worse.
The toilet paper run.
Yes. Cora and her sister Delilah are braving the empty, rainy streets of Chinatown. They aren't trying to save the world. They're just trying to buy a 4-pack of one-ply toilet paper.
Right.
The contrast the author builds between these two sisters in this scene is so stark, it almost feels like they belong to different species.
They are foils to one another, both physically and psychologically.
Totally. The book describes Delilah as a daydream. She's wearing pale pink. She has silk flower hair clips. She's ethereal, confident. She moves through this terrifying pandemic landscape almost as if she's floating above reality.
Untouchable.
Untouchable, exactly. And then there's Cora. Cora feels overwhelmingly physical. She is hyper-aware of her sweat, the oil on her skin, the crushing weight of her own anxiety.
Yeah, you really feel that.
The prose makes you feel Cora's discomfort in her own body. She feels like a heavy biological organism, while Delilah is just an arrangement of refracted light.
But the tension in that scene isn't just about their physical differences. It's about a profound emotional abandonment that's occurring right under the surface.
Oh, man, yeah.
As they are walking, Delilah casually mentions that she's going to ride out the pandemic in China to pursue a modeling career.
Yeah.
And she makes it abundantly clear, in a very offhand way, that she is not taking Cora with her.
That part crushed me. You can feel Cora's world just dropping out from under her.
Because Cora relies on Delilah as her anchor to the world. Delilah is the one who navigates the dirty city for her.
Right.
When Delilah says she's leaving, Cora is devastated. She realizes she's essentially being left behind, discarded by the only person she thought would never leave her.
Yeah.
The emotional foundation of Cora's life is cracking right before the physical horror even begins.
And it's right at the absolute peak of that emotional devastation, while Cora is reeling from this rejection, that the physical horror strikes.
Subway station.
They are standing on the platform at the East Broadway subway station. A man in a black hoodie and a blue surgical mask appears. He doesn't try to mug them. He doesn't ask for money. He just looks at Delilah, spits out the slur bad eater, and violently shoves her off the platform right into the path of an oncoming express train.
The author pulls no punches with the sensory details of this moment.
Yeah.
It is unflinchingly horrific.
It's brutal. It's meant to shock the system. Delilah is completely decapitated.
Yeah.
Cora's narration describes the sudden blast of hot air from the tunnel, the screeching of the metal brakes, and the visceral horror of being scorched by something viscous and salty.
Blood.
Yes. And the detail that really sticks with Cora, the specific image that sears itself into her brain and haunts her nightmares for the rest of the book, is the killer's hand.
The white spider.
Exactly. As he pushes Delilah, Cora describes his pale hand clamping onto Delilah's pink raincoat, looking exactly like a white spider.
That white spider image is not just a throwaway description. It becomes the central motif of the entire novel. It is the visual shorthand for the catalyst of Cora's total psychological fracturing.
You know, reading this scene, I kept thinking about trauma in the language of astrophysics.
Oh, interesting. How so?
I kept picturing trauma as a localized black hole in a person's timeline. It has this immense, inescapable gravitational pull. It bends all the light, all the logic, and all the time around it.
Right.
No matter how many days pass, no matter how far Cora tries to physically run away from that subway station, that black hole ensures she can never escape the singularity of that moment.
She's stuck.
Every thought she has orbits that platform. She is trapped in the event horizon of her sister's murder. But here's where I need your insight.
Mm-hmm.
How does the author frame this event? Because it happens so fast, it almost reads like a random, senseless act of madness from a deeply disturbed individual. Does the text present it that way? Or is it setting up something more systemic?
That's a vital distinction to make.
Mm-hmm.
Within the framework of the novel, the text is very clear on this point. It frames this not as random madness, but as a highly directed hate crime, fueled by the specific rhetoric of the pandemic.
Right.
The author is careful to show that the man doesn't just push her in a fugue state. He hurls the slur bat-eater at her first. The novel is explicitly tying the violence to the real-world scapegoating that occurred in early 2020, where Asian people were baselessly and maliciously blamed for the origin and spread of the virus.
So the white spider isn't just a description of a hand.
Precisely. The white spider isn't just one man in a hoodie. In the narrative's symbolic language, the white spider comes to represent the omnipresent, faceless, systemic threat of white supremacist violence.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is showing us how a global crisis like a pandemic doesn't simply create new prejudices out of thin air. Rather, it acts as a massive accelerant for the prejudices that are already deeply woven into the fabric of society.
Right.
The virus provides a convenient excuse for violence that was already lying dormant.
That is a deeply chilling realization, the idea that the crisis just gave people permission to be monsters. And this trauma completely dictates the trajectory of Cora's life. We jump forward a few months to August 2020. Cora hasn't healed. If anything, she has basically weaponized her trauma.
Yeah, her new job.
She takes a job working for a dry cleaner in Chinatown that has pivoted into a crime scene cleanup business. Because, as the book darkly notes, nobody needs their suits dry cleaned when the world is shut down, but unfortunately there are still bodies that need to be cleaned up.
It's a brilliant narrative pivot by the author. It forces Cora to confront death daily. And through this job, we are introduced to her cleanup crew, who are incredibly well-drawn, complex characters in their own right.
They really are. They bring this bizarre, necessary levity to an incredibly grim situation.
Yeah, they do.
You have Harvey, who is this loud, boisterous, horror movie-loving gamer. He approaches these horrific, blood-soaked apartments almost like they are special effects sets in a slasher movie.
A total defense mechanism.
Right. He distances himself through morbid humor and detachment. And then there's Yufei. She is fiercely protective. She's an undocumented Chinese immigrant, and she has this deeply unsettling habit of acting as a kleptomaniac at the crime scene.
Yeah, taking souvenirs.
She constantly steals little trinkets, a watch, a fork, a figurine from the dead people they are cleaning up after.
The dynamic between the three of them is essentially a masterclass in varied coping mechanisms.
Absolutely.
Harvey uses humor and media consumption to build a wall of unreality. Yufei uses kleptomania as a way to claw back some sense of ownership and identity from a world that refuses to acknowledge her existence.
That makes a lot of sense.
But Cora's reason for being there is arguably the most psychologically complex. You have to ask, why would a severe germaphobe, someone terrified of basic human contact, take a job scrubbing human remains, brain matter, and blood out of carpets?
Right. When I first read that, I thought it was a massive contradiction. It feels like the ultimate irony.
It does seem contradictory at first glance. But when you unpack the logic of her trauma, it makes perfect, chilling sense.
Okay.
The hazmat suit she wears on the job acts as both physical and emotional armor. When she is zipped into that suit, swaddled deep in that heavy plastic cocoon, breathing her own artificially filtered air, she is completely and utterly insulated from the world.
It's the ultimate boundary.
Exactly. She finds pea-scrubbing skull fragments out of a bathroom grout because, for the first time, she isn't touching the dirty city.
Yeah.
The trauma of the world, the threat of the virus, the threat of the white spider, none of it can reach her through the impenetrable plastic of the suit. It provides a false but necessary sense of absolute control.
And you really see how fragile that control is when she takes the suit off. The book goes into extreme detail about her post-work shower routine.
It's intense.
She specifically talks about how the shower after work is simultaneously the most wonderful and terrible hour of her day. It's not just a quick rinse.
No, not at all.
She uses Mechanics pumice soap, then a harsh salt scrub, and finishes with orange industrial dish soap. She scrubs herself until her skin is bright red and raw.
Yeah.
It's a grueling, almost punitive physical ritual. It's as if she's trying to scrub the psychological pain and the memory of her sister out of her own pores.
That ritual highlights the concept of ritualistic purification in psychology.
Yeah.
She is trying to wash away an internal contamination with external methods.
Right.
But as we see, her safe little bubble, her reliance on that hazmat suit to keep the darkness at bay, is about to be violently punctured.
Because the crew starts noticing a terrifying pattern in the jobs they are being sent to. They aren't just cleaning up random tragic accidents or typical domestic disputes.
No.
They're cleaning up a string of incredibly gruesome, highly specific murders, and all the victims are Asian women who have been killed in their own apartments.
And the author refuses to shy away from the brutality of these scenes. The violence depicted isn't just fatal. It is highly specific, methodical, and deeply symbolic.
It's a methodical destruction. I'll walk you through what Cora sees because the details are important.
Please do.
First, there's a victim named Yuxi He. She was a resident doctor. Cora finds her brains literally pooling in the bathtub. And when Cora goes to clear the drain, she pulls out a massive clump of what she thinks is hair, only to realize it's a dead bat that the killer forcefully stuffed down the drain.
It's just horrific.
Then there's Zihan Huang, who was axed to death with such overwhelming force that there are deep axe marks gouged into the floorboards. But the killer didn't stop there. He crammed live bats into her apartment's air vents and taped them shut so she would have to hear them dying and screeching.
Awful.
And then Ai Wu, a travel nurse, who was murdered in her bed with a giant bat mural painted on the wall above her headboard using her own blood. Harvey, using his movie logic, immediately starts calling the killer Batman.
The psychological terror of these specific killings is what stands out for analysis. The killer isn't just ending the lives of these women, he is physically unmaking them.
Unmaking them.
Yeah. He is intentionally turning them into unrecognizable, horrifying messes. There's an incredibly powerful defining speech that Yefei gives in the text where she captures the true underlying horror of what they are witnessing.
I remember that speech. It completely reframes what a crime scene actually is.
It does. Yufei says that this kind of extreme performative violence strips the victims of their humanity.
Right.
It turns them into mere biohazards for a cleanup crew to dispose of, or gore porn for true crime internet sleuths to obsess over. It completely erases their actual lived lives.
Yeah.
It erases their careers as doctors and nurses. It erases their dreams, their struggles, and reduces their entire complex existence to the gruesome, shocking way they died.
It's a total erasure of their personhood. They stop being people and become props in a killer's narrative.
Exactly.
But hearing all this, a huge glaring question immediately jumps out. If there's a serial killer leaving literal dead bats at the scenes of murdered Asian women across New York City during a pandemic where bats are the central symbol of racial scapegoating, why aren't the police stopping this?
That is the question.
Why isn't this the front page news of every paper in the country?
That brings us to a major thematic pillar of the book. The novel takes a very firm narrative stance on this, depicting a massive systemic cover-up by the fictional NYPD and the city's leader, Mayor Webb.
Okay.
To report impartially on the book's ideological framework, the narrative suggests that the deaths of these Asian women are simply ruthlessly deprioritized by the justice system.
They just don't care.
Within the context of the story, they care more about optics than justice. The bat calling cards are deliberately and meticulously kept out of the press reports by the police.
Right.
The fictional Mayor Webb is currently facing a tough election year, and he is already embroiled in a personal scandal involving an Asian woman.
Wow.
So the book posits that the administration actively suppresses the investigation to protect their political careers and manage the public narrative.
Wow.
The novel essentially frames the institution as viewing these murdered women as acceptable collateral damage in the game of political survival.
It's a terrifying concept to sit with. The idea that the very system designed, funded, and sworn to protect you actively decides in a boardroom somewhere that your life simply isn't worth the bad PR.
It is terrifying.
It creates this atmosphere of extreme paranoia and total helplessness for Cora and her crew. They are entirely on their own. And it's precisely in this atmosphere of profound societal abandonment that the book introduces its supernatural element.
Right, the shift.
The real-world horror bleeds into supernatural horror. Cora begins experiencing a haunting in her apartment, and it starts incredibly small, almost imperceptible.
Yeah, the apple.
An apple goes missing from her fridge. Then she finds deep human bite marks carved into the solid wood of her coffee table. Then the shadows in her apartment start stretching, behaving unnaturally, forming these horrifying elongated figures with needle-thin necks.
This is where the cultural folklore that the author has been weaving into the background takes center stage.
Okay, let's get into that.
We are introduced to the complex lore of Ghost Month, or Zongguin-ji, primarily through the characters of Cora's Auntie Zeng and her coworker Ye Fei.
Right, so let's unpack the mechanics of this folklore as presented in the book. According to the lore, on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month, the gates of hell physically open.
Yes.
The dead are permitted to walk the earth among the living, and there's a specific category of spirits highlighted. Those who suffered violent, sudden, unjust ends like being violently decapitated by a train, or those who are neglected by their living families and receive no offerings.
The hungry ghosts.
These spirits become hungry ghosts, and the physical description the author gives these ghosts is incredibly striking. They are described as having these grotesquely needle-thin necks.
Yeah.
This means they can barely swallow anything, but their stomachs are massive, and they possess this insatiable burning hunger. They can never, ever eat enough to be satisfied.
The mechanics of how these ghosts operate in the novel are fascinating and terrifying. Ye Fei explains the escalation.
How does that work?
They start by trying to eat normal human food, like the missing apple in Cora's fridge. But because regular earthly food can't satiate a supernatural spirit, the hunger drives them mad, and they eventually move on to needing blood and flesh to try and fill the void.
Right, it escalates.
This escalation leads to a darkly comedic scene where Harvey, trying to be helpful and protect his friends, attempts to fight off the ghosts using lore he learned from watching old Hong Kong Jiangxi movies.
Okay, I have to push back on this scene a little bit.
Oh.
When I was reading it, I felt so torn. Jiangxi are essentially these hopping vampire-like corpses from folklore. Harvey brings peachwood swords, heavy sacks of raw rice, and handheld mirrors to a park at midnight to try and ward them off. It's completely absurd.
It is very absurd.
Does this sudden injection of video game or B-movie logic undermine the relentless, suffocating horror the author has built up to this point? It felt almost like comic relief in a book that shouldn't have any.
It's a very valid critique, and it does jar the reader, but I would argue that the absurdity is exactly the point.
Right.
The author is using Harvey's reaction to highlight how ill-equipped we are to deal with true, incomprehensible trauma. Harvey is desperately trying to apply a rule book, even a silly fictional rule book, to a real-world nightmare that has no rules.
Right. Trying to make sense of it.
Exactly. In trauma psychology, turning to the familiar, even the absurdly familiar, is a documented defense mechanism. When the real world stops making sense, Harvey retreats to the logic of the movies, where the good guys have specific weapons and the monsters have specific weaknesses. It's an illusion of control.
That makes a lot of sense. He's trying to force a narrative structure onto chaos.
Yeah.
But moving past Harvey's movie tropes, I think the concept of the hungry ghost itself is one of the most brilliant, evocative metaphors for unresolved grief that I've ever encountered.
Absolutely.
Think about it. The ghost's insatiable, agonizing hunger is a literal physical manifestation of a hunger for justice. It's a hunger that simply cannot be satisfied by normal earthly means like police reports or court cases because the earthly systems have entirely failed them.
They have.
The system covered up their deaths, so their hunger becomes monstrous.
That's a profoundly astute reading of the text. The hungry ghost operates as the physical embodiment of the trauma that society aggressively refuses to acknowledge.
Right.
When you bury a crime, the ghost is what crawls out of the grave.
And Cora is entirely convinced that the ghost haunting her apartment, eating her food, and leaving bite marks on her furniture is her sister, Delilah.
Of course she is.
And honestly, why wouldn't she be? The ghost is wearing the exact same jade bracelet that their Auntie Zeng gave Delilah years ago, the specific one with the gold plate that says hope. It feels like undeniable proof.
It does.
So Cora, Ye Fei, and Harvey decide to hold a massive traditional feast in Cora's apartment on the final day of Ghost Month. They are trying to appease Delilah's restless spirit so she can find peace.
Such a sad scene.
Ye Fei cooks this incredible, elaborate spread biang biang noodles, steamed dumplings, spicy chicken. They set a formal place at the table, light the ceremonial candles, and offer the food to the empty chair. And the ghost actually manifests.
It does.
It appears, unhinges its jaw in this terrifying display, and violently eats the food right off the plate. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The twist that the author deploys here completely fractures the narrative foundation we've been standing on.
It changes absolutely everything. Right after the terrifying feast, Cora goes to speak to her Auntie Zeng. And Auntie Zeng reveals something incredibly shocking.
Yeah.
She casually mentions that she has been secretly burning literal mountains of joss paper for Delilah since her death.
Right.
For those who might not know, joss paper is spirit money, an intricately crafted paper goods, houses, cars, clothes that are burned in traditional Chinese rituals to send wealth and comfort to the deceased in the afterlife.
Exactly.
Auntie Zeng made absolutely, positively sure that Delilah's spirit would be incredibly wealthy and well-fed.
Which logically means that the ghost currently haunting Cora, the ghost with the insatiable, agonizing hunger that just ate the feast in her living room, cannot possibly be Delilah.
Right.
Delilah's spirit is provided for.
It's not her sister. The realization hits Cora like a freight train. She realizes that the ghost in her apartment is actually Yuxi.
The resident doctor.
Yes. The doctor from the very first crime scene they cleaned, the one with her brains in the bathtub and the bat in the drain.
Yeah.
And this revelation entirely recontextualizes the haunting. Yuxi's ghost wasn't trying to hurt Cora. She wasn't a malicious entity. She was trying to communicate.
She was trying to lead her.
She was trying to lead Cora somewhere. Specifically, she was leading Cora to a massive clue she had found before she was murdered. A hidden, encrypted USB drive that originally belonged to another murdered victim, a police officer named Officer Wang.
This is a pivotal structural moment in the book. Cora has spent the entire novel hiding.
Yeah, she has.
She hides in her apartment, she hides behind her germophobia, and she physically hides inside her hazmat suit. But this revelation forces her to take action. She can no longer be a passive victim.
Exactly. The ghost basically hands her a baton. So Cora goes down to the police precinct and does something completely out of character, something that requires immense bravery and deception.
She lies to the police.
She lies to the police. She pretends to be Officer Wang's grieving, estranged widow in order to gain access to his personal effects box. And she successfully steals the USB drive right out from under the noses of the NYPD.
Incredible.
But when she gets home and plugs it into her computer, what she finds is a waking nightmare. It contains 374 high-resolution photos of murdered Asian women from all across the country. And every single photo features that same terrifying bat calling card.
The contents of the USB drive reveal the true ideological core of the novel.
Right.
To detail exactly what the text presents to the reader, the drive doesn't just contain photos. It contains audio recordings of a high-ranking police superior explicitly and aggressively ordering Officer Wang to drop his investigation into the murders, threatening his career and his life if he goes to the press.
Wow.
But more importantly, the files reveal the truth about the killer. There is no single Batman. The entire serial killer theory that Harvey and Cora constructed is wrong.
Yeah.
The USB contains undeniable evidence of a massive, decentralized movement of copycat killers. The book attributes this networked violence to internet hate groups, neo-Nazis, and the pervasive racist rhetoric that blamed Chinese people for the pandemic. It's a localized, stochastic terrorism network.
It's such a devastating, paralyzing realization for Cora. And I have to admit, when I read the USB drive scene, I felt almost cheated at first.
Right.
I wanted there to be one monster. As a reader, you want a single serial killer because a single monster can be hunted.
That makes sense.
A single monster has a physical body that can be caught, locked away, or killed.
Yeah.
You can focus all your rage, all your grief on one man. It provides a neat narrative solution. But what Cora finds is a systemic societal rot. There are hundreds of white spiders. It's the guy on the subway platform. It's the guy posting on the internet forum. It's the neighbor down the hall. How does the author use this specific revelation to shift the genre of the book? Because it feels like it abruptly stops being a standard thriller and becomes something much heavier.
It's a masterful, deliberate genre shift by Baker. By revealing that the killer is decentralized, she shifts the book from a standard thriller into the realm of pure social horror.
Social horror.
She makes the horror inescapable. The white spider becomes everyone and no one. You can't just avoid walking down dark alleys at night. The threat is woven directly into the everyday fabric of society.
Right.
The novel uses this revelation to critique how marginalized groups are systematically scapegoated during global crises. It mirrors the very real-world anxieties of 2020, where the biological fear of a virus mutated into a sociological fear of the people falsely blamed for it.
It mutated.
Wow. The social horror stems from the realization that the monster isn't hiding in the shadows. The monster is the society that creates the shadows in the first place. This raises an important question. How does someone as powerless, as isolated, and as traumatized as Cora fight a decentralized societal monster?
The heartbreaking, realistic answer is that initially she can't. The monster's too big and it fights back first. This leads us directly into the climax of the book, which is just relentlessly gut-wrenching.
It's so hard to read.
The network of killers, because we know now there are multiple individuals coordinating target the cleanup crew. They realize Cora and her friends are getting too close to the truth. Harvey and Yafei are brutally attacked.
Yeah.
Harvey, the guy who loved horror movies and spent the whole book treating the blood like special effects, is murdered in the dry cleaning machine at their shop. He's shoved into a machine filled with perc, which is a highly toxic, suffocating dry cleaning chemical. It's an agonizing death. And Yufei, the fierce, uncompromising survivor, is killed in a violent car crash while desperately trying to escape the killers.
The tragedy of Yufei's death is particularly profound, and the author ensures it hits incredibly hard because of the backstory that is revealed just moments before she dies.
Yes. As they're fleeing in the car, Yufei finally opens up and tells Cora the truth about her past. It's a story of systemic erasure from the very beginning.
Right.
She was born in China during the strict enforcement of the one-child policy. Because her parents were impoverished and culturally desperate for a son to carry on the family line, they considered her a disappointment. They never even gave her a proper name.
That's unbelievable.
They referred to her as girl. She survived that neglect, eventually escaped to America, named herself Yifei after a glamorous, famous actress she saw on a television screen, and built this entire fiercely independent life from absolute scratch.
Yeah.
And then she is murdered by racists. And because she is completely undocumented with no official footprint, she is rendered a Jane Doe in a New York City morgue. She lived her entire life fighting tooth and nail for an identity, and in death, the bureaucratic system erased her name all over again.
It's a devastating critique. The author uses Yufei's arc to highlight the extreme vulnerability of undocumented individuals, showing how easily they can slip through the cracks of a society, both in life and in death.
Right.
They're rendered invisible until their bodies become a problem to solve. This immense compounding loss of both her sister and her chosen family pushes Cora completely past the brink of her fear. She loses all her anchors to the normal world.
She does. The black hole finally consumes her, and it leads to this incredibly powerful, shocking moment of transformation. Cora is walking out on the street, reeling from the deaths of her friends, and she's confronted by a racist white man at a crosswalk.
Oh, this scene.
He looks at her and casually calls her a bat eater. For the entire book, Cora has shrunk away from this. She has hidden, she has scrubbed herself raw, trying to be clean, trying to be acceptable, trying to be the invisible, good American.
Right.
But this time, something snaps. She doesn't shrink. She screams right back at him at the top of her lungs, I am a fucking bat eater.
That is a phenomenal cathartic moment of reclamation. By explicitly embracing the slur, by leaning into the monstrous, diseased identity that this racist society has relentlessly projected onto her, Cora strips the white men of their power to invoke fear.
Wow.
She essentially flips the script. She says, you think I'm a monster, you think I'm the source of the plague. Fine, I will be the exact monster you are afraid of. She stops trying to be the victim and consciously decides to become the threat.
And she takes that terrifying, monstrous energy straight into the supernatural climax of the novel. Cora grabs heavy propane tanks and descends into the pitch-black, abandoned subway tunnels of the East Broadway station, the exact specific place where Delilah was murdered.
Returning to the start.
She is returning to the site of the original trauma. She takes a knife, slices her own skin, and physically bleeds herself onto the subway tracks. She knows from the folklore that hungry ghosts are irresistibly drawn to the scent of fresh blood.
She uses her own life force, her own pain, as a beacon to summon them.
Exactly, and they come, hundreds of them. The spirits of the 374 murdered Asian women from the photos on the USB drive, including Yuxi-hee, all rise from the darkness of the tunnels.
What an image.
They are starving, rotting, and furious. Cora stands at the head of this spectral, horrific army. She leads them out of the subterranean darkness of the subway, guides them away from Chinatown, and marches them straight toward the wealthy, heavily guarded neighborhoods of the copycat killers and the complicit politicians.
Yeah.
She unleashes this supernatural force to exact their bloody, terrifying vengeance on the society that killed them and covered it up.
It's an incredibly striking cinematic image. In literary terms, this climax serves as a dark, deeply cathartic fantasy.
Yeah.
The author is exploring a profound question. What happens when the legal and justice systems completely, fundamentally fail a marginalized community? In this supernatural framework, Baker provides an answer. When the courts fail, the victims return from the grave to literally consume the society that discarded them and looked the other way. It's an exercise in supreme power for the utterly powerless. It's a violent balancing of the scales.
It's a staggering, breathless climax. It leaves you spinning. And then the book transitions, and we move into the aftermath. The narrative jumps forward a year to spring 2021.
A very different world.
The book resolves some of the immediate, overarching plot threads. We learn that the corrupt, fictional Mayor Webb dies in an unexplained house fire, strongly implying the ghosts got him.
Yeah.
Cora takes the encrypted USB drive and successfully leaks it to an investigative reporter at the New York Times, which predictably sparks massive nationwide protests and finally forces the federal and local police to dismantle the copycat network. But the true emotional core of the resolution isn't about the villains. It's about Cora herself. She survives.
She does survive, but what makes the ending so effective is that the text is incredibly careful to show that her survival isn't a magical, happily ever after cure. The trauma doesn't just vanish because the bad guys are dead.
Right. We see her getting her COVID-19 vaccine at the Javits Center, which is such a great specific grounding detail for that exact time period in New York.
It really is.
It anchors the supernatural story back in our shared reality. She goes back to her apartment and creates a permanent makeshift altar for everyone she lost: Delilah, Yifei, Harvey, and Officer Wang.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love this one detail. She uses the absurd, twisted forkmobile that Yufei stole from a crime scene as the literal centerpiece of the altar. It's a beautiful, weird, deeply personal tribute to her friend's chaotic spirit.
It's perfect.
But as you said, her healing isn't perfect. We see that she still carries military-grade pepper spray. She still wears a rape whistle around her neck that shrieks at 150 decibels. The hypervigilance, the fear, it hasn't magically vanished. But the crucial difference is she is finally able to start thinking about what she actually likes, rather than just what she fears. She likes feeding her aunt's fish. She likes the sensation of feeling cold water on her bare feet at the beach. She is slowly, tentatively allowing herself to exist as a person with preferences beyond just being a vessel for trauma.
That nuance is absolutely critical to the book's success. Healing from systemic trauma, from profound, world-shattering grief, isn't about forgetting what happened or miraculously returning to exactly the naive person you were before the trauma occurred.
Right.
That person is gone. Healing is about finding a way to integrate that trauma into your life story and still carve out moments of agency, preference, and humanity.
And that deeply nuanced, realistic view of trauma bleeds right out of the fiction and into the actual author's note at the very end of the text. It's one of the most impactful author's notes I've read.
Yes, the author's note provides vital, explicit meta-context for the novel's overarching themes. It bridges the gap between the fictional horror and the real-world inspiration.
To report impartially on what the author explicitly states in this note, Kylie Baker reflects on the pandemic as a massive, revealing moment for modern society.
Yeah.
She argues that the pandemic stripped away the polite veneer and revealed a societal willingness to happily sacrifice vulnerable populations, the elderly, the immunocompromised, essential workers on what she terms the altar of capitalism.
Right.
And she directly addresses the intense wave of anti-Asian hate that inspired the novel's core conflict. But what's crucial is how she frames this violence. She doesn't view it in a vacuum. She explicitly links the Stop Asian Hate movement to the broader civil rights movement in America.
He does.
She states unequivocally in the text that there can be no justice for Asian Americans without simultaneous justice for Black, Latino, and Indigenous communities, specifically referencing the Black Lives Matter movement and the historical precedent of Trayvon Martin.
The author is making a clear, forceful argument for intersectionality. The ideological framework of the novel posits that you cannot isolate and dismantle one form of white supremacy or systemic racism while ignoring the others.
Right.
They are all deeply connected branches of the exact same toxic tree. To fight one, You must fight them all.
It's a very heavy, very dark story we've been discussing today. We're talking about brutal decapitations, racist copycat serial killers, and profound societal betrayal. So my final question to you is, how do we reconcile this incredibly grim, blood-soaked narrative with the author's final message in that note? Because she ends on a note of hope.
I think to reconcile that, you have to look closely at Baker's specific phrasing in the final lines. She talks about the necessity of finding light-soaked joy.
Light-soaked joy.
The novel, for all its ghosts and gore, is ultimately a testament to survival. Despite the unimaginable compounding trauma of 2020, both the documented real-world history we all lived through and the exaggerated supernatural fictional horror of the book, the author, and by extension her protagonist Cora, found ways to endure.
Yeah, they did.
They built chosen families, they fiercely reclaimed their stolen identities, and they found a way to look toward a future that isn't entirely 100% defined by the horror they endured. The darkness of the story is what makes the pursuit of that light-soaked joy so absolutely necessary for survival.
That's a beautiful, profound way to phrase it. The joy is the ultimate rebellion against the horror. We've covered an immense amount of ground today. We started in the terrifying, echoing, hyper-isolated landscape of a pandemic-stricken New York City. We explored the psychological armor of a hazmat suit, and we followed Cora through a supernatural nightmare of grief, systemic racism, and ultimate bloody reclamation.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. It's a stark reminder that while the real-world history of 2020 was incredibly traumatic and disorienting for so many of us, stories like Bat Eater and other names for Cora Zeng offer us a powerful, if undeniably dark lens through which to process it. They give a physical form and a face to the abstract fears we struggled to name.
Exactly. Fiction, especially horror fiction, allows us to confront these massive, overwhelming monsters in a controlled environment so we can better understand and dismantle the realities of the world outside the book.
I couldn't agree more. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, lingering thought to ponder as you go about the rest of your day. Think back to that terrifying image of the hungry ghost, with its needle-thin neck and its insatiable, burning need for justice.
Yeah.
If our own unresolved grief, our personal traumas, and our unacknowledged, buried societal sins are the modern-day hungry ghosts wandering our streets and haunting our institutions, what is the collective feast we need to prepare in order to finally truly put them to rest?
That is the essential question, isn't it? Figuring out the recipe for that feast.
It really is. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this deep dive today. We'll see you next time.